Hi everyone, my name is JT and this presentation is going to be focusing on the need for expanding LGBTQIA plus student organizations and support systems within higher education. This topic highlights the inclusive practices that are necessary in order to improve higher education institutions and the programs within, as well as my own personal journey with achieving this as my career in academia moves forward. First, I'd like to introduce this topic and the importance of addressing it. I'll explain the synthesis of the literature and research that guided my presentation. We will highlight the key themes and the gaps throughout the research that I found and how I'd make recommendations personally based on those patterns. I think it's also important to discuss the activism and social justice aspects of this topic and then move into the future directions for higher education institutions. LGBT students continue to face systemic barriers in higher education, even as universities publicly embrace diversity and inclusion for all. Much of this support remains symbolic, like visibility campaigns, statements of solidarity, or occasional programming, while deeper structural changes that shape the student experiences themselves are often more neglected. Hostile or unsupportive campus climates, limited resources, and more heteronormative policies are disproportionately impacting these students. I think that these challenges are even greater for students with multiple marginalized identities, including queer and trans students of color or first generation students, or those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. An intersectional lens also makes it clear that LGBT students are not a monolithic group, and equities can compound in ways that institutions often overlook. Expanding student organizations and support systems is not just beneficial, in my opinion, it's also essential for cultivating more belonging and community, as well as advocating for leadership and agency for the students themselves. Queer and trans student organizations provide critical spaces for community building and challenging those dominant norms and fostering leadership that differs from traditional structures as well. Reform in higher education must move beyond those token gestures toward actual systemic change that is going to center around the voices and the needs and the lived experiences of LGBT students. Creating those environments where students feel safe and empowered is really what's important, and to have more structural accountability as well. The research used for this presentation shows that campus climate plays a critical role in LGBT students' well-being. When students perceive that their environments are hostile or unsafe, I think that their sense of belonging and mental health suffers as well. Affirming climates, by contrast, or supporting engagement, community connection, and retention, all of this helps. And intersectionality is essential in understanding that these experiences are real. So, students who also hold other marginalized identities, such as students of color and first generation students or trans non binary students, these students are facing compounded challenges that this one size fits all support system just can't address everything. The resources are varying widely, so across all institutions, students at more well funded and urban or progressive campuses are often having more access to organizations and services, while those at rural or conservative institutions face greater barriers. As well as if you come from a background of lower socioeconomic status, that also is just more of a personal barrier for any student. Student led groups frequently act as counterbalances, which is a sense of providing spaces for leadership and advocacy and community. Trans and non binary students face unique barriers, though, including exclusionary policies and limited access to the gender affirming resources that they're in need of. Meaningful inclusion requires both institutional accountability and active student advocacy. Campus change is most effective when administration aligns with ongoing student activism. I noticed several key themes emerge from the research throughout the presentation and the work. So, first off, there is the distinction between structural and symbolic inclusion, so that surface level gestures can't replace long term investment in policies, the resources, and the support systems involved. Second, the leadership development is vital. Queer student organizations provide opportunities for more authentic, transformative leadership that challenges the traditional models, and that's necessary. Third, the intersectional support is necessary as well. Students with multiple marginalized identities face layered barriers, and support systems must reflect this complexity in order for it to be improving and evolving. Finally, the institutional culture shapes experiences, campus norms, values, and attitudes that influence the belonging and the mental health and academic engagement of the students. I think that the supportive environments are creating and fostering more resilience with students, while the more exclusionary climates and segregated climates can lead to more isolation and stress or imposter syndrome in general for these communities plays a factor, so we have to keep that in mind. Together, all of these themes are showing that meaningful inclusion requires more systemic change, sustained leadership opportunities, and intentional efforts to create the climates where LGBT students can actually thrive and have a sense of agency and autonomy for themselves. For the recommendations, I would start with the increasing of funding and staffing for LGBTQ centers that would provide more consistent and accessible support beyond the symbolic programming. And increasing funding is obviously difficult, but you can start with asking for donors and going through more fundraising events and charitable donations. Support student led organizations as well as central spaces for the advocacy, the leadership, and the community building to take place. Adopting intersectional frameworks in the campus policies, which could address the needs of students with more than one marginalized identity, so the multiple marginalized identity groups. Being able to have campus policies that are also willing to evolve with times and have the accountability to check in and seek improvement when needed. Improving leadership pipelines as well for queer and trans students to be able to foster that more authentic, identity informed leadership. Implementing campus wide climate transformation strategies. This would be able to create more genuinely inclusive environments, and that would be across academic, residential, and administrative spaces. And then that's something that students can go home with themselves at the end of the day as well. I'd like to discuss the activism and social justice aspects of this topic because I think it's one of the most important parts of it, personally. Activism and social justice are central to supporting the LGBTQ students, and the student led organizations are often serving as the heart of the work, and it's providing the spaces for the community and the identities and the advocacy for oneself to be able to take place. So these groups are redefining the leadership and challenging the restrictive norms and create the visibility in the historically more marginalized environments and marginalized communities. I think it's most impactful for the campus change to begin at the grassroots level, for students to be able to push past the institutions beyond the like symbolic gestures of it all and advocate for accountability and resources to improve and structural reform to take place. An intersectional approach would ensure that students with layered marginalized identities are also being fully supported and using their own voices to ask for what they need and advocate for themselves. Queer leadership itself becomes a form of resistance. And I think that that's emphasizing the authenticity that would take place within an institution and the care and the the need for the institution itself to claim that they are diversity driven. It's to also back that and give provide that care and assurance that queer leadership is actually taking place and not just something that is being marketed or something. So I think that there's systemic critique in that, and there's always room for feedback. So it's very important to be open to that as an institution as well. Collective student activism has that power to transform campus climate and improve the belonging and the community itself to like truly strengthen the well-being of your peers around you and students in this community, because it's often something that activism is spoke on, but also having faculty and staff behind it and being a part of it and advocating for it, it also creates a pattern where others want to get involved. And then you have students becoming activists and being agents of that social change and that activism. So I think that's very important for faculty and staff to be also included in this and set that example. Looking ahead, I'd say that I'm personally committed to advocating for more of the structural change to take place, like I said in the last slide, through more activism and social justice movements rather than just the symbolic gestures that are spoken of and talked about, but often don't have any real action behind them. This would include shaping the policies that are in place, reallocating the resources that we already have at our institutions, and then also partnering with the student activists to ensure that their voices are central to the decision making itself. I think that's a huge part. A key focus is also fully including and affirming trans and non binary students. So, this requires examining the language in the policies, the processes that take place, institutional norms that default to more binary frameworks, and actively redesigning them to change the binary and make things more inclusive and less gender oriented, um, like gender role oriented. So, this work is also requiring more ongoing learning and reflection for the institution and accountability, essentially. So, staying current with the research and engaging in professional development and remaining attentive to student needs will allow me personally to contribute the meaningful inclusivity that is necessary at institutions that either parents are paying for their children to go to or adults to go to, or these students are paying their own money to go to these institutions and it should represent themselves. I think that remaining attentive to student needs will allow me and allow institutions to contribute to the more justice centered environment that we are hoping to have in higher education. Research shows that LGBTQ students' success is closely tied to the campus climate itself. So, supportive environments improve a sense of belonging, mental health, and academic engagement. Institutions must also move beyond the gestures and commit to the structural changes that are necessary to genuinely support students. Empowering queer and trans students as leaders strengthens the entire campus community and ensures reform that reflects the lived experiences of these students. Transforming the binary based systems allow diverse students to thrive and have autonomy and agency. By embracing the shifts, and the higher education systems can move closer to more equitable and affirming spaces for all.